Well, hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of The Therapy Show. I'm your host, Lisa Mustard, and welcome to another raw and unedited, unscripted episode of the show where I answer some listener questions and give you guys some of my feedback and advice. And I want to remind you, of course, that this is just for information and educational purposes only. Please consult with your therapist or doctor before changing anything that you're already doing. I love these questions, but I also want to remind you that when I answer these questions, I'm just answering them. I'm kind of like generalizing in a lot of ways because everybody's situation is so unique and everybody's issues are so unique to them that I can't, just because you hear something that I say and I answer a question and it kind of resonates with you does not mean that it's actually probably maybe the best suggestion for whatever it is that you're working on with your therapist. I can't stress this enough. It's really important. This is for information, educational purposes. If it sparks an interest in you or you get curious about something that I say and it like resonates with you, then go and talk about that with your therapist or do some research. But just remember that I am a therapist, but I am not your therapist. Okay. All right. The first question that I had was, what are your thoughts on the impact of social media and technology on our mental health and relationships? Wow, I have a lot of thoughts on this. And I I am 50, so I grew up without technology. I didn't really have social media or a smartphone until my mid 30s, I would say. I remember logging into Facebook for the very first time when I was pregnant with my first child, and that was over, 16 years ago now. So I grew up without social media. I grew up having to talk to people and to use a payphone and to have, write notes in class back and forth, no texting, no phones, none of that. So as an adult, when I started using these things, I saw a change in how I was reacting and responding to the world and to relationships. So I can only imagine what it is like for someone much younger than me who, one of my kids, like, for example, I look at them and they're growing up with technology. They never had the luxury, I say luxury, y'all probably laugh, of not having technology at your fingertips. It really was and is a luxury at times. And I get tired of it. I don't want to be on it. I want to put my phone away. I want to hide it in the dresser. I don't want to be on social media because it definitely does take away from being more human with people and connecting with them. I go to restaurants, I go places and, I don't usually take out my phone. I kind of observe what's going on, but I look at families sitting at tables and they all have their phones out. I look at people on dates, couples on dates, and they all have their phone out. So I definitely believe that technology and social media are taking a toll on our mental health and relationships. I mean, I think that many people struggle with being, quote unquote, addicted to their phone. So I'm kind of just speaking in generalities here, but I do see a difference. I do, some of my clients, they talk about how it's easier to use social media and use their phone to connect and talk with people. And that worries me because I wonder about their, development, social development, emotional development, and it depends on the age, of course. But, COVID did a number on us and really kind of, I think for our kids, maybe stunted some of our kids and their emotional and social growth for sure. So what am I saying? I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts. But yes, I do believe it has definitely made an impact on kids and families and adults. I mean, everybody. I think it has impacted everybody. I think the bigger question is if you find that it is impacting you and your relationships and you want to do something about it, then you need to do something about it. You need to work to stay off of it. You need to put a plan in place, maybe talk to somebody about what's really going on underneath. Why are you so focused and engaged on your phone when you have people in front of you or an opportunity to go out and be around people? Like, what's really going on? Now, that could be a number of things. I'm not going to dive into all the different things that could be because, man, I could be here for an hour. But I guess my suggestion is if you find that it is impacting your functioning, getting through the day, how often you're checking it, then that could be a problem for you. It's getting in the way of your relationships, you're connecting with your family and friends, significant others, then that could be an issue you want to talk about with a therapist. So I hope I answered that question. But yes, it is making an impact. And it's not always a good impact. So I'll just leave it at that. All right. Next question I got was, how important is it for therapists to seek their own therapy and how has it benefited you personally and professionally? Well, I mean, I think it's important because therapists are people too. And we all have issues. We all have problems. We all have things that get us stuck sometimes in life. So yeah, I think it's important for therapists to seek their own therapy. Yeah, I mean, definitely I do when I need it. Life coach as well. I've shared in past episode how it has benefited me personally as well as professionally. It helped me, therapy helped me recognize that the experiences I had as a teen and child impacted how I was showing up in relationships in my teens and in my 20s. And I didn't like that. I didn't like how I was showing up in those relationships. So I went to therapy at that point in life. I also went to therapy after having our first child because some of that stuff was poking itself back up again. And I remember I only went a couple times because the therapist she was really good and she was like really direct with me. I really like that. And I think as a therapist, I've become more direct. I think it's just me and how I like to help people. But I remember she said, your issue isn't, you're not, you're overwhelmed and you're stressed by having a child and you're trying to balance or prioritize all these things. She said, but really what your issue is, you're having a hard time asking for help. And I thought, wow, she hit the nail on the head. And she was right. And I think I knew that underneath. And that stemmed from growing up in a family where my mom and dad were divorced and my mom was the primary caretaker. So she was doing everything for me and my sister. I mean, she was working jobs. She was driving us everywhere we needed to go until we could drive. She was paying all the bills. She was mom and dad. My dad was pretty absent at that time in my life. And so I took that on and said, man, the woman has to do everything and she can't ask for help because I didn't see that. It wasn't modeled for me growing up. I don't blame my mom. I don't blame that situation, but it had imprinted on me, right? It was an event in my life or a number of events in my life that imprinted on my belief system. So my belief system at that time in my life was I have to do everything on my own. That's what mothers do. Okay. So that's another example of how therapy benefited me personally. I've shared with you guys, it has benefited me professionally when I hit burnout. Actually, when I hit burnout, I did talk to a therapist, but I also talked to a life coach. And I think what came from that was, the burnout. I was almost kind of choosing to be in burnout. That's a long story there. But what I recognized was that I had to change my belief system once again as to what I wanted my work, quote unquote, to look like. And that's like I told you guys in another episode, that's when I kind of realized that I wanted to start a podcast and challenge myself with something new. And I think that to overcome burnout, sometimes we have to challenge ourselves with learning a new skill, learning a new technique, doing something different. Because if we do the same thing over and over again and expect different results, that can be the definition of insanity as well as burnout for me. So I hope that helps. Okay, next question. Let's see. I have a couple here. What role do mindfulness practices play in emotional wellness, and how can someone start incorporating them into their daily life? That is a really great question. And I like it a lot. And I want to share with you guys that I did create a new private podcast that you are welcome to go and subscribe to, where I am giving guided meditations and hypnosis recording. So I'll put a link in the show note. I have one already uploaded. I've gotten requests to do one on sleep, attracting your perfect relationship, weight management. So I'm gonna create those in the next couple of weeks and upload them, and they're free. You can just listen to them at your convenience. But go ahead and grab the guided meditation and hypnosis link in the show notes. Go ahead and click it, subscribe, and it's a private podcast. So it's not going to be out on Apple or Spotify. You can only find it through this link. But what role do they play in emotional wellness? So mindfulness to me is I boil it down to being self-aware of how am I reacting and responding to an event that's happening before me? Sometimes I can't control that event, right? So that's probably the hardest one when you can't control what's happening in front of you. How do you react and respond? And so paying attention to what you're doing, being self-aware is part of that mindfulness practice. And I like to, it's, you got to take yourself outside of yourself in a sense and look at what's going on in the moment and how do you want to show up and how do you want to react. I mean, it just comes down to that. And I practice this all the time with being a mom because, you know, I think for me right now in my life, that's where I'm at is there's a lot going on with our kids and what they're doing and what they want to do and where they want to go and all those things. And I have my own ideas of what they should and shouldn't be doing. But I recognize that, of course, they're their own individuals and they're growing and learning. And I have to just be aware and mindful of how I react and respond to what they want to do and where, all those things. Um, and I think that makes me a better mom. I think that makes me a better person, a better wife, just being self-aware. And I think so much of it is just self-awareness. If people could just be more self-aware of what it is they're doing and saying and acting, and is that how you want to show up in this world? Are you being congruent? Are you being in alignment with that person that you want to become? To me, that's mindfulness. And for some people, it's really hard. That's a really hard thing for people to do. They've never thought about it that way. It might be a new skill you're learning. So, you hear about these mindfulness practices. Well, one of them is something like when you're eating, slow down your chewing and really taste each bite and pay attention to the flavor, pay attention to the texture. I mean, that's really a mindfulness exercise because that slows things down and it has you reacting and responding to whatever is going on or going into your mouth, and you're paying attention. Okay. So I just want people to maybe start paying attention. I think that's probably, I don't have another mindfulness idea or practice, but that's something that I like to talk about with my clients is when something happens and they're giving me, a story or a situation they went through. That's what I'm asking them. So what were you thinking then? Or what was that like for you? Or how did you think you were going to respond versus how you did respond? Just helping them learn how to be more aware. I think that's really, really important. Okay, the next question. How crucial is the role of a support system in someone's mental health journey, and how can one build such a system? I interviewed somebody recently, and one of the things he talked about was having a support system, having people that he could talk to. And he really believes that was what got him through the tough times or helps him kind of get through tough times. And now that I think about it, everybody that I've interviewed recently who's overcome a mental health challenge or is overcoming a mental health challenge, that's one of the most important things that they talk about is having a support system, having somebody that will listen to them and will listen to them. What's the word I'm trying to say? Listen with not judgment, being unconditional in their listening. And that's really, really important. If you don't have a system like that or have a support system like that, how do you build one? That's tough. I think a lot depends on, I always say if people just had a good support system, that would be so, so great. So I want to suggest that if you're working with a therapist, definitely talk about how you can build a system where you can create one, where you can find, healthy people that you can connect with. And I think that's really important. But if you don't have a therapist and you're looking to find a support system, look around. Who are your close friends? Who are your family members that you trust? And if you don't have those things, it's going to take some work possibly, but there are groups out there you can join. There are, maybe find in your church or your synagogue, maybe there's support systems there. Talk to other people and ask them for suggestions. Support systems are so important, and connection with other people is so important. So I would encourage you, if that's where you're stuck, how can you find one or create one? Okay, so I have another question. I like this one. What strategies do you recommend for mental health professionals to prevent burnout and maintain their own well-being? Well, gosh, I think so. If I'm talking to another therapist and I want to hear about what's going on, I'm going to ask some questions about, how many sessions a week are they doing? What are their boundaries like with their clients? What are their boundaries like with family and friends? Are they working outside of their scope? Are they taking everybody as a client instead of really focusing in on their ideal client or the issues that they like to work with? Maybe they're not charging enough and they feel like they have to take on so many clients to make an income. There's a lot of things that could be going on for mental health professionals that are leading to burnout. But if that's you and you're a mental health professional, ask yourself those questions and get really clear on your systems and maybe what you could be doing differently to really help with preventing your burnout. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups that cater to therapists, and this is a question. These types of questions come up all the time. There are plenty of books out there that you can, read on burnout, self-care, all that good stuff. I think you have to hone in on what's really causing you that burnout. Sometimes it's just you're overwhelmed. You're taking on too many clients. You're not charging enough, those types of things. Okay, I think I'm going to answer one more question. I got a bunch here. Okay, so the last question I'm going to answer is how do you tailor therapy sessions to meet the unique needs of each client? Ooh, that is such a good question. And I really like that question. I think it honestly, obviously, I think I say obviously, but maybe it's not obvious. I am going to tailor therapy sessions to meet the needs of my client by what they bring to therapy. So I don't have an agenda when people come to therapy. My only agenda is to help them figure out what's going on. And if they want to change something in their lives, how can I help them? So I don't have an agenda. I listen to my clients and I let them tell me what they want to change in their lives. Sometimes they don't know what it is that they want to change in their lives, but they might feel sad or they might feel anxious and they want to work on moving through that sadness or anxiety. So I let the client tell me what they want to work on, and then we go from there. I mean, I think that there's a lot of different ways that people like, I don't know how, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't know what people's expectations are when it comes to understanding the therapy process. Um, so if you're asking these questions and you just kind of want to know like what is therapy and how does it work, it's just that you come to therapy, you have a problem, you talk about your problem, you tell the therapist what's going on, and it might take a couple sessions for you to feel comfortable with that therapist. It might take a couple sessions for the therapist to help you really figure out what's going on underneath the presenting problem. And then it takes a couple sessions to kind of figure out how you want to work on it. So I know once again, I'm being very vague. I'm being very abstract in what I'm trying to say, but a therapist is there to help you to be a sounding board and to hold a mirror up to you and say, how do you want to live your life? Are you okay with how you're living your life? What do you want to change about your life? And what have you already tried? Maybe we ask that question. What have you already tried? How did that work out for you? And then from there, it's like, okay, so maybe those things didn't work for you. What are you hoping is going to happen? If I could wave a wand and give you exactly what you wanted, what would that be? I love that question. And we just go from there. So I don't know. I once again being a little bit abstract, being a little bit, kind of out. Maybe you guys think that's kind of out there, but in my world, I've been doing this for so many years. This is how I like to do therapy. Now, I'm not a fit for everybody. I'm not a fit for every client, every presenting issue. My expertise, I feel, really lies with working with women 35 plus who are going through midlife stuff, and they kind of want to maybe they're at a place in their life where it's like, hey, how did I get here? I'm not happy like I used to be, or my kids are leaving the house and I don't know what to do when they're gone, or my husband and I are thinking about, getting a divorce. So all kinds of stuff, all kinds of different issues. So I hope that answers, I hope that helps. I'm just kind of like, like I said, riffing on these questions. I didn't really write anything out ahead of time. I just took the questions and wanted to answer them very raw and unscripted on an episode. I do want to remind you guys, like I said, this is just for information and educational purposes. I am not your therapist, so talk to your therapist. If you hear something on this episode that you want to know more about, or if you're looking for a therapist, I'll put some resources in the show notes that might be able to help you find a therapist. And don't forget to go ahead and subscribe to that free podcast, Guided Meditations and Hypnosis. Just click the link in the show notes. I hope you guys are enjoying these. If you have questions you want me to answer, feel free to email me, lisa@lisamustard.com, or fill out the contact me form on my website, which is, I'll put that link in the show notes. All right, y'all have a great, great start to your week, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it with your friends and family. Subscribe to the podcast, leave me a rating and review. I would forever be grateful. Okay, y'all take care.